Russia has been expanding its influence in Africa in recent years, and after the invasion of Ukraine, it will be expecting its newfound allies to provide support, or at least remain neutral in international bodies such as the United Nations. According to the BBC, from Libya to Mali, Sudan, the Central African Republic, Mozambique, and elsewhere, Russia has been getting more involved, often militarily, with help fighting rebels or jihadist militants. At the UN Security Council, Kenya, currently a non-permanent member, made its opposition to the Russian action in Ukraine very clear. Similarly, Gabon and Ghana have spoken up against the invasion, while the African Union has expressed extreme concern about what is going on. Like Nigeria, South Africa, which is a partner of Russia in the BRICS group, has called on the country to withdraw its forces from Ukraine, but said it still had out hope for a negotiated solution. On the other hand, the president of the Central African Republic, Faustin Archange Touadéra, has been reported as backing Russia's decision to recognize the Ukrainian regions of Donetsk and Luhansk as independent states. And on Wednesday, the deputy leader of the Sudanese junta, Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo, led a delegation to Moscow in a sign of closer ties between the two countries. Now joining us from Abuja to discuss the escalating conflict between Russia and Western-backed Ukraine, the mixed reactions coming from Africa to the conflict, and the fate of thousands of students still stranded in Ukraine, is Ambassador Joe Keshi. Ambassador Keshi is a retired diplomat who served in 8 countries and in various capacities, including serving as Consul General at the Nigerian Consulate in Atlanta, Georgia, and as Permanent Secretary in Nigeria's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Good morning, Ambassador Keshi, and welcome to the morning show.
Good morning, Ruben. Good morning, Tundu, and good morning, Rufai. Welcome back, Rufai. I hope you enjoyed your holidays. We also missed you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Well, Ambassador Keshi, 5 days now of war in Ukraine, instigated by Russia as the aggressor. We'd like to have your general take on what is playing out, the isolation of Russia, Russia's determination claiming sovereignty, and also how African countries have responded. Do we really have any say in the matter, or this is just a case of diplomatic twerking? You know, somebody referred to it in a more, ludicrous manner.
Well, let me begin with whether Africa has a say or not in this crisis. Africa and the member states of the AU are members of the international community. And certainly we have the right to express our views when the international law governing the relationship among states guaranteeing world peace is broken by a member and a superpower for that matter. And I should also add that, this is not just unfortunate because it is Russia. We've had a situation where other superpowers have done something similar. And this is why we in this part of the world need to speak up and let the rest of the world know, particularly the superpowers, that they cannot, at any given time, for their own interests or selfish interests, decide to jeopardize global peace and security. We also have a stake in ensuring there are peaceful, a global peace, and therefore it's our right, it's our responsibility to speak up when the international system that was designed to guarantee the safety of everybody is strengthened by, to a large extent, selfish and irresponsible behavior of states. I'm not saying that states do not have the right or the right to take decisions on, when it concerns their national interest, but I think they should be honest about what they want to do. And in the case of what's going on currently in Russia, when you listen to all the arguments that have been made by President Putin, he is indirectly saying, look, the United States and its allies have done this so many times. I too can do it because, you know, and you can also lie about it. You know, let's all remember, I've seen so many on my WhatsApp and colleagues, we've exchanged, you know, communication on this, and everybody has kind of taken positions. But let's remember how this crisis started. You know, it started around 2014, I think, when, you know, the last president, I think, you know, wanted to join the EU. And under Russian pressure, you know, he was dissuaded from joining the EU. And that led to the collapse of that government and the election of the current president in Ukraine. Since then, Russia has been very, very unhappy. And what it did, of course, was to instigate rebellion in Donbass and the other region closer to the Russian border. And the consequence is what we are now experiencing. You know, so again, as I said, we have a right as member states of the global community to take a position, to express our view. And I think some of the statements that have been made by some countries, particularly the Russian, particularly the Kenyan ambassador in the UN, and I think most of us should listen to that speak, because he made a good point, that look, we in this continent, in Africa, we are living with borders created by the colonialists, and we have decided to live with it. And the rest of the world should also learn to live with whatever kind of borders they have for the sake of global peace and tranquility.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for exploding certain myths there of this binary narrative of good guys and bad guys where none exists. But I want your take on the current travails of Nigerians that are stranded in Ukraine and at the borders and unable to get out because of, you know, stark racism here. And it just, when you look at the whole situation as an ambassador, what is your take on what ought to have happened and what should happen going forward? Because the conclusion is quite inescapable at this point. It looks like somebody or some people fell asleep at the wheel. Nigerians are there, hungry and cold. We saw footage of a tiny baby in freezing weather conditions. It's completely unacceptable.
Tundu, let me start by saying that I sympathize with them. I have been in this situation, you know, a couple of years ago in Sierra Leone. When the crisis in Sierra Leone was deteriorating, we decided to make plans in case we needed to evacuate Nigerians. And then we went around the country, led by the ambassador. We covered the whole country trying to register Nigerians. What did we find out? We found out by our you know, census, the Nigerians who registered were 5,000. When Sierra Leone completely collapsed, Nigerians who came to us for assistance were 20,000. You can see the disparity between 20 and 50. What am I trying to say? Trying to evacuate people would always be challenging, would always be messy. One, because I'm not sure, as we later found out in the case of Sierra Leone, and to a large extent in Liberia, when you are telling your citizens about, you know, the impending crisis and what they need to do, they pay very little attention. That's number one. Number two, also, the country itself, the foreign ministry, and you know, nobody makes a forward-looking plan until the problem becomes, deteriorates as it has done in Ukraine. But I think that what the ministry has tried to do so far, I've seen a lot of communication between, Nigerian embassies around Ukraine, offering assistance and help to Nigerians once they can get to the border. Look, at this point in time, that is the best they can do. Those who have parliamentarian diplomats who have toyed with the idea that they will send their peace, I think they are just making a ridicule of the whole thing. The truth of the matter is, any time at all there is crisis, it is challenging for almost everybody, especially in trying to evacuate your people. Look, you can see what the Americans did. They started warning early enough. But most people believe, including yours sincerely, we believed at some point that the Russian president was not reckless enough to attack. But here we are. We all made a mistake about that belief.
Okay. We had the American intelligence to warn the American people. where was the Nigerian intelligence to warn the Nigerian people about this? I suppose we have intelligence officers in different embassies all around the world. Where was the Nigerian intelligence? That's number one. Secondly, will be what is happening now in Africa. Some countries are supporting Russia because of what they can get from Russia. Central African Republic and Tudela will support Russia because the Russian-originated Wagner group is fighting in Central African Republic. And we have the same in Mali. And we have the same in Sahel of Africa. When is the time for Africa to come out strong and call out these nations supporting Russia?
Rufai, with respect to your first question, let me say with all modesty, having served as a permanent secretary both at the Cabinet Secretariat and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I can assure you that our National Intelligence Agency, they do a very fantastic job. Please take it from me that they do a good job. The only difference between what the Americans do and what we do is that we do not actually engage the public enough. We do not make this, this kind of information often available, but we do try to, they do try to pass it, the NIA do try to pass it through various agencies and of course through their guys at respective missions. And so I can assure you honestly that they also have the same information, perhaps not as deep as the Americans do have. And by the way, all these international agencies do work together, Secondly, with respect to Africa, look, let's forget Central African Republic, for goodness sake. But let's focus on the fact that the countries that need to speak up in this part of the world are doing so. And that's exactly what we need to focus on. What AU needs to do now is to rally around support and express a common collective view. This is an aggression against member states of the United Nations. This is an aggression against, that could threaten world peace. And we need to stand up and condemn it. If you do not condemn it today, you never know where it can, where it would stop. And this is why everybody must be worried about the last decision of President Putin to be as reckless as he has become over the last couple of days. And look, as you can see, this is day 4 or day 5. They are not even holding any city. It just shows you the amount of challenge that they will face, even if it's regime change. Look at everywhere they've changed regimes. There has been terrible, terrible consequences at the end of the day.
Okay, Ambassador Keshi, 2 quick questions. Is there still room for diplomacy in this? The entire West is against Russia. But Ukraine, Zelensky, the Ukrainian president says, well, he's open to dialogue, but he has given 2 conditions. He says the dialogue cannot be held in Belarus. It has to be by the border. And he's also saying that the voting rights of Russia on the UN Security Council should be taken away from it. Is that also feasible? With those 2 very strict conditions, do you see diplomacy still being a way out of this? And secondly, the Nigerian response. Some of us have argued that the response of the Nigerian authorities has been reactive, whereas the situation that we have on our hands was foreseeable, and that the foreign ministry, the embassy in Kiev, dropped the ball. What do you think they should have done differently, and what can they still do differently?
To your first question about diplomacy is always very possible at any given time at all, whether there is war or no war. And at the end of the day, all wars have always ended in a negotiated settlement. Even the World War, the powers at that time, met and signed an agreement to end the war. So diplomacy is possible, but everybody must come to the negotiating table with the desire and the sincerity to make peace and bring this ugly situation to to an end. So diplomacy is possible, and I sincerely hope that the proposed talks will take place and that it will be meaningful. Secondly, to your question about the president, Ruben, if you were in his shoes, will you go to Belarus at this point in time? Of course not. I personally would not go to Belarus if I was in his shoes. And I think I commend him for being strategic in saying that, no, let's hold this meeting at the border. And in fact, I spent last night contemplating how this meeting will be held, whether they will borrow the long table from Putin's office so that it will be at the middle and the president of Ukraine will be sitting on the Ukraine side and Belarus officials and the Russians will be on the Belarus. So if anything happens, he could run back quickly to his territory. That's on a lighter note. But the truth of the matter is, yes, diplomacy is possible, and I sincerely hope that both parties are coming to the table, with a desire to make peace. To your second question, when you are going into negotiations, you have a starting position. That, at the end of the day, might not be the position that you will hold once talks begin. So he has taken what you can describe for now. I mean, the first condition he gave, in my view, was correct and right. And if I were in his shoes, I'd probably do the same thing. The second condition would be very difficult to achieve, but I think he made it in order to put on table, their negotiating position. But as the talks begin and progresses, certainly positions would change when everybody is faced with the reality on ground. With what the Nigerian embassy or embassies around Ukraine can do now. Look, Ruben, as I said before, evacuating nationals in times of crisis is very challenging. I had this experience. I've experienced this myself, and eventually actually left Sierra Leone as a refugee at the end of the day. What I think that they are doing now, they have encouraged Nigerians living close to any border at all, to come over. The Nigerian embassies in these countries, are prepared to help. At this point in time, that is what and the best they can do. In other words, once Nigerians get across to the border of any of these countries, the embassies, staffs of the embassies are there to provide all possible assistance. As for the fact that we do not take, measures early enough, well, to a large extent that is true. And I'll say that on another platform, more than 3-4 weeks ago, I warned that this could happen and said that we should be prepared for any eventualities. It's unfortunate that everybody thought that President Putin was just, his goal was very limited. Take over the two separatist states. Nobody believed, except, of course, the Americans had intelligence. But the intelligence was based on the fact that when they look from the sky and look at the amount of arms and ammunition and men being amassed around the Ukrainian border, they concluded that this is certainly not for a limited operation. But the rest of the world was hoping that it would not be true. Unfortunately, it turned out to be true.
Right. UK's red top tabloids, in their inimitable way with words, when they're drafting their headlines, have one headline this morning: "Mad Vlad goes nuclear." So it appears that Vladimir Putin is actually ratcheting things up rather than trying to have any kind of de-escalation. And this goes to that meeting that's supposedly been held on the border of Belarus and Ukraine. Belarus is not even neutral territory, with reports that their military could intervene. They also have a dog in this fight. And then there are the comments from the British Foreign Minister, Liz Truss, saying that this conflict could last a number of years and that Putin is ready to deploy nuclear weapons. What do you make of all of this? Is this really that intractable? Even President Zelensky of Ukraine does not hold a lot of hope for peace talks now.
In the land of my ancestors, we say this is Shakara, who say, what's the essence of using nuclear weapon? Where? How? For whom? There's no nuclear war going on. Nobody has shot at Russia. So where is it going to deploy the nuclear? Look, it just shows you the amount of pressure that President Putin is at this point in time. Let's face it. Whether he wins the war, whether he takes Kiev tomorrow or is able to occupy a number of places, the truth of the matter is that he himself will admit that he has miscalculated. I'm not sure that he took into account, you know, the capacity and the ability, the readiness and the willingness of the people of Ukraine, with or without arms, to confront the Russian army. I'm not sure he took that into, you know, I'm not sure he took into account their resistance spirit, which has made it so difficult for the Russian army, you know, to execute their plans. Things are not going well. As of now, as of today, things are not going too well for the Russians. And it begins to show you the amount of pressure. So this is just another example of the fact that President Putin is feeling the pressure. And look at what he said. He said because a number of Western allies have made reckless statements. Is it because somebody has made a reckless statement that you now ask your generals, you know, to get nuclear weapons ready? To do what? It doesn't really make sense. And as I said, we in this part of the world, we just say, look, that's Shakara.
Ambassador, after all of this, is it time for the West to deal with Putin decisively? Because three things this war has shown in the first 5 days: that Putin's army is not as great as we thought it was. If a couple of Molotov cocktail-carrying Ukrainians have been able to repel the might of the second largest army in the world, or the largest army in Europe, I should say, then he's not as strong as he is. Secondly, I think the invincibility cloak about Putin has been broken. Secondly. So, thirdly, is this just the time to deal with him decisively and probably take him out?
Look, I think they're already doing that. Most people don't realize that the Russian economy as of today is about the size of the economy of Spain. And so when you impose some of these sanctions that have been imposed by the West in particular, you know, certainly it will affect the economy. Look, it takes time for sanctions to work, but it does work, as we realized in the case of sanctions against the apartheid regime in South Africa. When Western companies began to withdraw, you know, their interest and, you know, their presence in South Africa, the whites came to their senses because they looked at the pulse, at their pockets, and it was affecting their pockets. And they decided to make some changes. They decided to make a compromise. They had a choice between between looking at their pulse, between negotiating with the old men who appeared more moderate and reasonable, than allowing the guys on the street to take over the whole country. So they made, you know, at the end of the day, due to the sanctions that was imposed on South Africa at that time, you know, when it began to kick in, they came to their senses. Certainly, it would take quite some time, but the measures that have been deployed so far, I believe, will certainly have an impact, an effective impact on the Russian economy. And so I don't know what you mean by effectively, whether to go to war or whether to send troops, you know, no. Look, you have to realize why they have not put troops on the ground in the first instance. Number one, from the American perspective, the Americans are tired of war. They've been in war for the last 20 years. And President Biden actually campaigned on this, and you know, which was one of the reasons why he took the decision, you know, to withdraw from Afghanistan. Secondly is the fact that, yes, Ukraine has this desire at the end of the day to become a member of NATO, but it's not yet a member of NATO. So what they are doing for now is to put forces around the NATO countries, which are, by the way, around, you know, Ukraine itself and around Russia. Look, one of the tactical mistakes, Putin has made is the fact that NATO is far closer to Russia today than it was yesterday because of, you know, this miscalculation by President Putin. No matter what anybody says, NATO forces. And last night, the EU announced that they were going to now begin to send literal arms to Ukraine. And by the way, look at Germany. Germany has been relatively quiet when it comes to these issues over the last couple of years. And now the German new chancellor is talking of sending arms to Ukraine. Nobody would have expected this a couple of years ago, that Germany would do this, but here we are. And that's because, in my view, it's part of the mistake that we thought that President Putin was very calculating, but apparently he did not give strong thought to all the possible options, and I'm not sure he took into account, all the likely consequences of his action, and he's paying a price for that now.
Okay, Ambassador Keshi, I see you are not a fan of President Putin, although Putin and his advisors insist that this is about sovereignty and the right of Russia to defend itself. But for how much longer, or for how long, do you think that Russia and President Putin will be able to hold out with all these attacks from the allies and from the Western community and even from Africa?
Ruben, it's not that I'm not a fan of President Putin and the rest of it. No, I don't think that is that is it. Look, I think that when big brothers or big nations decide to take actions that have that has been taken against a member state of the international community for whatever reason. You remember even before the armed invasion, in fact, there are two reasons why Putin is very upset. Number one, his guy was removed in the first place in Ukraine. Number two, even the guy who wanted to go to the EU, and the people revolted against him, and then they brought in this, comedian president. That did not make Putin happy. We're not talking of Russia being unhappy. At least as of today, considerable number of Russians are demonstrating against the invasion of Ukraine. So it has nothing to do whether I'm a fan or not. Yeah, to a large extent, there were times I was admiring him. But when you violate the rule of engagement, and recklessly too, I can understand if you decide to recognize, support the two separatist states who are demanding. But again, you see, you must understand that some of these things have implications. Some of these things have implications for global peace and stability. And for countries like Nigeria, there's a video circulating of an Owerri woman who tried to analyze the situation in Russia. Between Russia and Ukraine. And he made an example. He gave an example to, the way he was trying to explain it to the people. He said the Ukrainians are like we here, the Ukrainians are like we here, demanding for Biafra. So this is an example of the consequences of, when you take this action, that it could also instigate certain things in other countries that you do not expect. And this is what should concern all of us, around the globe. Now, what if the Chinese get up tomorrow and begin to attack Taiwan? Also, of course, they want to unify. They will tell us that they once upon a time they were cousins, relations, brothers and sisters, But China is already too big a country to start with. And they want to add that. Why don't they allow Taiwan to grow on its own? Why don't you just allow Ukraine to grow on its own? The people of Ukraine want freedom. They want liberty. And they want to grow on their own. What is wrong in anybody demanding to be free and to be allowed to develop, in accordance with their own desires?
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador Joe Keshi, for your time and for your insights and for agreeing to speak to us on the morning show today. Thank you very much indeed.